fact, for fifth consecutive winter, we have heavy deployment of troops in eastern Ladakh from both sides. If we learn to live with it, accept it as the new normal, then the Chinese will essentially achieve that they try to do through their grey zone operations.
Joining us to speak on India's China policy is Ambassador Ashok Kantha, former ambassador to China, who served earlier as High Commissioner to Sri Lanka and Malaysia, the United States, Nepal, Singapore, and Hong Kong. He was Secretary East in the Ministry of External Affairs, prolific writer and commentator. He's Director, Institute of Chinese Studies, and Senior Fellow at the Vivekananda International Foundation. Welcome, Ambassador. Now, moving from the dam to look at whether, despite all the tough talk by India at recent forums and questionable speculation that there is a recalibration of the China-India dynamic, the China's double game which seems to be in play, is Ambassador Kantha. In a world that is now dominated by Trumpian tariff and trade wars, global disorder, transactional diplomacy, where do India and China stand, Ambassador Kantha? How do we characterize this relationship? I mean, they're civilizational rivals, unquestionably, but is there a thaw on the cards, or is that just part of China's double game? You know, China, the clever bully on the international stage, using diplomatic, geopolitical, and economic theft to keep India tied up on the line of actual control, making all the right noises, saying its diplomatic talks with India are on the border were candid, which is what the statement was earlier today. But it is limiting India's economic rise, don't you think? I mean, its geopolitical heft in South Asia and East is quite limited.
Well, Neena, let's begin with the recognition of fact that in India-China relations, India also is agency. We make our own assessment of what China wishes to achieve, what we wish to achieve. At this point of time, we are trying to rebuild relations. As you're aware, there was a fairly extended period of sharp downturn relations, which started in summer of 2020 when Chinese moved into certain areas of eastern Ladakh. Then we had a disengagement. Prime Minister Modi had a meeting with President Xi in Kazan in Russia on 23rd October last year. And a process of re-engagement has commenced. You would have noticed that there have been several meetings, bilateral meetings between two countries. Some of the recent meetings have been on the margins of SU-related events. Our defense minister visited, NSA visited, foreign minister visited. Earlier, our foreign secretary had gone for his dialogue with the vice foreign minister of China after a gap of 5 years. So this process is going on. What we have achieved so far is there is a modicum of stability in relations. Borders are not yet normal, but they are less tense since disengagement has been carried out, but de-escalation of troops has not taken place. In fact, for fifth consecutive winter, we have heavy deployment of troops in eastern Ladakh from both sides. In terms of rebuilding relations, both sides have focused on what is described as people-centric, initiatives. So, we were interested in resumption of Kailash Mansarovar pilgrimage. That has happened. There has been re-engagement at the level of think tanks. We also have just, a couple of days ago, decided to start giving tourist visas once again to Chinese nationals. In principle, we have agreed to resume direct flights, but that has not happened so far. We have decided to mark 75th anniversary of establishment of diplomatic relations, though that's happening in a relatively low-key manner. I believe deliberately, because we don't wish to project that relations are back to a state of normalcy. So,
But
where we are today, relations are stable, but not yet normal. In fact, new outstanding issues have surfaced. We can discuss that later. Old
we'll bring it
challenges
up.
have not gone away. So it remains a difficult, complex relationship, and the geopolitical context is even more challenging in view of what President Trump is doing in his second administration, kind of pressure he has generated both on China and India. So there is a certain readiness in both countries to make tactical adjustments. That gives them more space geopolitically, but it's only tactical at this point of time.
That's right. But in fact, Ambassador, when we were talking earlier this week, you did say that India's very, very strong presence at the SCO was quite interesting because, why has India accepted these buffer zones? I mean, it is something which is not really to our benefit, is it? I mean, the People's Liberation Army is very much a presence there. I was reading up somewhere about how China is using the border issue, keeping it unresolved deliberately, using it as a strategic tool to keep India under pressure. Do you agree with that? I mean, is that something which is a factor in the way that India tackles China?
Well, Nina, you have raised two different questions. One is the issue of buffer zone. We don't use the term buffer zone there, but Minister of External Affairs, in a statement in Parliament on 3rd and 4th December last year, he referred to steps of a temporary and limited nature. By definition, if it's temporary, then it should not last for too long. From what we understand, that there are pockets where the status quo ante has not been restored in terms of access given to Indian troops to patrol those areas, or Indian graziers to go to pastures they were visiting earlier. To my mind, this situation needs to be rectified as early as possible. If we learn to live with it, accept it as the new normal, then the Chinese will essentially achieve that they try to do through their gray zone operations. Typically what they try to do is to make incremental gains, create a new normal, staying under threshold of outright military conflict, and then use that as base for further encroachments. So we need to ensure that the so-called buffer zones, or steps of limited and temporary nature, are terminated as early as possible. I have seen statements by Chief Army Staff General Upendra Dwivedi saying that Indian Army would like status quo to be restored as of April 2020. So that also involves, doing away with so-called buffer zones. Coming to a larger question on China using the border issue as a pressure point in relation, that's a fact. I have dealt with this issue for a long time as a negotiator, both on agreements on confidence building measures to ensure peace and tranquility in border areas, as well as the agreement on political parameters and guiding principle of boundary settlement, which was signed in April 2005. I was the negotiator for that. There was a clear understanding on both sides that any continued development of India-China relations is predicated on both sides not taking unilateral steps to disturb the status quo. And we should move towards common understanding of LAC, which is provided for in one of the agreements, agreement of November 1996, China somehow didn't quite follow those understandings. It stymied the process of LAC clarification, and you're aware what happened in Eastern Ladakh in summer of 2020, which led to a sharp downturn in relations. When it comes to boundary settlement, there again, while we could agree on political parameters and guiding principles, boundary settlement, which to my mind were very sound, reasonable set of principles and parameters. Next step was meant to be a framework where two sides will make adjustments in their respective positions to arrive at some understanding. Chinese have not shown any interest in that. In fact, Chinese are insisting on concessions by India, which they are aware we cannot make. For instance, they would like to have large adjustments by India in the eastern sector, including ceding Taiwan. Only then they'll make corresponding concessions in the western sector. They know it's non-starter. It's my assessment that Chinese are in no hurry to move towards boundary settlement. They believe that time is on their side, and they would like to keep unresolved border, both in terms of ambiguity on line of actual control and unsettled boundary, as a pressure point in relations which they can activate from time to time, as they did in Eastern Ladakh in 2020.
Exactly.
So we have the situation. We understand. It's not that we don't understand the situation.
Well, very well put, Ambassador. That's really an eye opener. And there are whispers, I must say again, of a deal on Siachen, which India occupies, and Aksai Chin, which China occupies. I mean, I know it's speculation, and I know that this is probably not going to happen. But the bigger issue, Ambassador, before India and
First,
China.
let me, Neena, I'm not aware of any such deal being in the pipeline.
It's just gossip.
Yeah, either on Siachen or on Aksai Chin. So much of is really, if there is such a speculation, it's baseless.
It is.
So
it
we
is.
should not give it currency.
But on the new kid on the block, so to speak, Pakistan, India has to contend with China's active backing of Pakistan. I mean, militarily, the Chinese personnel were physically present apparently in Pakistan, when they were tracking AI and drones, the Indian armed forces, so every move during Operation Sindoor. It was China's fighter aircraft, China's advanced missile technology that was at the forefront of what was literally a war between India and China's proxy Pakistan. So, do you think that this shadow war is something that India is comfortable with? I mean, it obviously cannot be, but has it raised any of these issues? Just raising it at SEO and at the UN, even then it got shot down by the Chinese.
Well, we don't raise these issues in SEO or UN. That is not our diplomatic position to raise these bilateral issues in multilateral or plurilateral platforms. But when it comes
I basically meant the issue of Pakistan's involvement in Pahalgam.
Yes, Pahalgam is different. I mean, that's a question of terrorism, which we have been raising. Coming to China-Pakistan nexus, first we must have a clear understanding of nature of this relationship. Right since 1960s, when China and Pakistan entered into so-called boundary agreement, under which Pakistan ceded Sakshgam tract to China in 1963. China has pursued a very consistent policy of building up Pakistan's strategic and conventional capabilities to keep India off balance. So China has used Pakistan as a proxy all along. And this has involved, you're aware that their covert and overt support to Pakistan's nuclear weapon program, missile program, and a whole lot of, very critical areas. But what has happened? What happened during its 7 hour standoff, military standoff between India and Pakistan between 7th and 10th May? Is it something different? Because in earlier India-Pakistan conflict situations, China did not get involved directly. They made some noises from time to time. 1965, they gave an ultimatum that within 3 days you do this, otherwise we'll do this. But nothing really happened. 71, in fact, and 99, they by and large kept out. They provided diplomatic support to Pakistan, but not, getting involved in military operations. This time, what we saw uh, is something very disturbing. One, we had for the first time deployment of advanced weapon systems provided by China in combat situation. And a deputy chief of army staff mentioned publicly it was sort of a lab where China were testing out their weaponry. That's one. Second, we have every reason to believe that China was providing real-time ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance support to Pakistan. And this has been confirmed by Deputy Chief Army Staff also publicly. Third, China was providing PETO satellite navigation system data to Pakistan. And in fact, it was with Chinese assistance that very unusual battlefield integration was carried out of key military platforms, including Swedish origin Saab 2000 AWACS, Chinese origin J-10C aircraft, and Chinese origin PL-15C missiles. So they were integrated. And integration was taking place through PETO system. And then we had evidence of China providing what you referred to real-time support, their military doctrines being deployed, including network-centric warfare, cyber operations. So in a way, what we had India-Pakistan theater, but China was an ever-present factor backing up Pakistan. And they will have to work on the assumption that China and Pakistan will work together to sort of take care of vulnerabilities, weaknesses in Pakistan's defense machinery that were exposed, including air defense system. They will plug those loopholes and they will take interoperability to a different level. So this is a significant development which has created major complications for a deterrence dynamics vis-a-vis both China and Pakistan. This is something we need to take up strongly with China. We should make it very clear to them that this pattern of behavior will have consequences in terms of impact on future trajectory of India-China relations. There will be a cost. They shouldn't think that they can do something like this and will pretend that relations are returning to normalcy in a smooth manner.
Ambassador Saxena, I know you've got to go, but I wanted to also bring in ASEAN, now look east policy, act east policy now. Where do we stand on that? Because India's relationship with ASEAN countries is not what it used to be. Our Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has called past trade agreements with ASEAN as silly. He's described the ASEAN bloc as a B team of China because obviously they are using loopholes to get indirect entry of Chinese goods into India. So we built defense ties. India's built defense ties with the Philippines, with Vietnam, Thailand. I mean, we've even invited the Indonesian president for the Republic Day parade. So why is it that India has not been able to, move forward and tie up and strengthen our ties with ASEAN? Because it looks as if we have not really gone down that route.
Well, we have invested a lot in building our relations with ASEAN since initiation of Look East policy way back in 1991, and later, when Prime Minister Modi came to office, it was upgraded to Act East policy. Uh, I have been involved with this in different capacities, including as Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, and also as High Commissioner in Malaysia. So I can tell you that working with ASEAN, developing strategic, economic, diplomatic, political, civilizational links with this part of the world is extremely important for us. You're perhaps right that recently some comments have emanated from India, which are perhaps not well advised. There are some difficulties in implementation of India-ASEAN FTA or FTA or CEPA. We have signed with others like Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand. We need to address those issues, but we should not in any way give the impression that we are downgrading our strategic engagement with ASEAN. China is extremely active in that part of the world. If you look at the last ASEAN meeting, we had representation from China, US, and other countries at foreign ministers level. We were represented at the Minister of State level. That itself sent a signal. China is looking at ASEAN there as a key partner when it's seeking to diversify its trade away from excessive dependence on US market. It has set up manufacturing in ASEAN countries. Also in terms of linkages, diplomatic, people-to-people tourism, it has invested a lot. I think we cannot be seen as wanting this area. So much more work needs to be done to reinvigorate our Act East policy.
Your final word, Ambassador, on where you see India-China relations going forward, because even with Quad, under Joe Biden's administration, India seemed to have been given a very high profile, but that doesn't seem to be the same level of intensity that is now being given by the Trump administration, which it's also trying to build bridges with China on its own level. So, I mean, how do we navigate this, the US-China, you know, connection?
We are passing through a period of acute geopolitical uncertainty. USA has adopted certain trade and tariff policies which are actually directed not against China only, but against the rest of the world as well. In fact, when it comes to China-US negotiations on tariffs and export control, one can argue that in the game of escalation dominance, it's China which has come out with an upper hand. There are signals that the USA is weakening its export control regime applicable to China, and there is a lack of clarity on a US strategic stance towards China. In first Trump administration, there was great clarity. US categorically, described China as a strategic rival, but in second Trump administration, we are not very clear that what Mr. Trump wishes to achieve vis-a-vis China. I'm not saying that Quad is losing relevance. In fact, within hours of new government administration being sworn in, we had a meeting of Quad foreign ministers in Washington, D.C., another meeting recently. But to my mind, in our policy towards China will have to depend increasingly on our own capabilities, our own asymmetric deterrence. And while we seek constructive engagement with China, we cannot be unmindful of the fact that China has not only not addressed outstanding issues which have been there, but new issues have surfaced. You were discussing earlier about what's happening, this Bedog project on the lower reaches of Yalung Sangpo River, which has very serious implications for us. And China has decided to undertake this project without any prior consultation with us. We just discussed, a case of battlefield collusion between China and Pakistan. Then there are reports of economic coercion by China. You're aware of how supply of rare earth magnets or specialized fertilizers were held back. How Foxconn was asked to send
cancel
600 technicians back to China. So I think these are signals we have to assess very carefully, and we need to discuss very carefully with China. So we cannot be in a hurry to move towards any normalization relations with China. One thing, borders are still not normal. And secondly, normalization will require some progress on these issues. We cannot just sweep these problems under the carpet and pretend that things are coming back to normal track. That's not the case.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.